I want a single to London King's Cross. The railway ticket seller would remember those 7 words for the rest of his life, not because of how they were said, but because of who said them. A 14-year-old boy, small for his age, standing alone at Doncaster Station on a Friday morning when he should have been in math class. The boy had £200 cash in his pocket, nearly every penny he owned. He was captured on security cameras walking through King's Cross Station at 11:25 a.m., black slipknot t-shirt, canvas bag slung over his shoulder, completely alone in Britain's busiest transport hub. This was Andrew Gosden's final confirmed sighting. Here's what makes this case extraordinary. Andrew was the definition of a homebody. His parents called him a home bird, a quiet teenager who collected rocks, played video games in the basement, and had never shown the slightest interest in rebellion. He had no conflicts with his family, no signs of depression, no history of running away. His biggest adventure was usually walking to the local shop. Yet on September 14, 2007, this predictable, routine-loving boy orchestrated a perfect disappearance. He skipped school, withdrew his life savings, bought a one-way ticket to London, and vanished without a trace. If this already has you curious, hit like and stay with me. For 18 years his family searched. Police followed thousands of leads. The case went cold, became legend, spawned documentaries and podcasts. Then, in December 2021, authorities made 2 arrests. After nearly 2 decades, they thought they had their answer. They were dead wrong. September 14, 2007, Doncaster, England. In a modest terraced house on Gosden Avenue, 14-year-old Andrew Paul Gosden was getting ready for what his parents thought would be an ordinary Friday. His bedroom walls were covered with posters of Slipknot, Marilyn Manson, and Muse, heavy metal bands that reflected his quiet intensity. Andrew was intellectually gifted, finding his schoolwork relatively boring and very easy, but he was also deeply introverted. He spent hours in his converted basement bedroom, playing Xbox, polishing his rock collection, reading science fiction novels. His father would later describe him as someone whose convictions were difficult to sway, a boy who thought deeply about everything. Kevin and Glenys Gosden had built their family life around fostering independence. Both committed professionals, they encouraged their children to explore their interests without pressure. They trusted Andrew completely. He had never given them reason not to. Their son was reliable, predictable, content with his routines. The idea that he might deceive them had never crossed their minds. 20 miles away at Doncaster railway station, ticket seller Dave Leppard was beginning another routine shift. Sharp-eyed and experienced, he prided himself on remembering faces and conversations. He had worked the counter for years, processing thousands of transactions. Most customers blended together in his memory. But Andrew had been planning something that would make this Friday different from every other day of his life. None of them knew that by evening, their worlds would be forever changed. At 8:05 a.m., Andrew left his house wearing his school uniform, black trousers, white shirt, school tie. A family friend spotted him walking through Westfield Park toward his usual bus stop. This sighting would later become crucial evidence that Andrew had initially intended to follow his normal routine. But somewhere between leaving home and reaching the bus stop, Andrew changed his mind. At approximately 8:30 a.m., neighbor security cameras captured him returning home. The footage shows a boy moving with purpose, not confusion. Back in his bedroom, Andrew stripped off his school uniform and changed into civilian clothes, black jeans, his favorite black Slipknot t-shirt, and trainers. He gathered his PSP handheld gaming console, his keys, and his wallet. Most significantly, he picked up his black canvas satchel, the one decorated with patches from his favorite metal bands. By 9 a.m., Andrew was at a local cash machine. The ATM dispensed money in £20 increments only. From his total balance of £214, he withdrew £200, leaving just £14 in his account. This represented nearly his entire life savings, accumulated from birthday gifts and pocket money over several years. Curiously, he left additional birthday money behind in his bedroom, suggesting either haste or a specific financial target. The walk to Doncaster railway station took 18 minutes. At 9:23 a.m., Andrew approached the ticket counter where Dave Leppard was working. The conversation was brief but memorable. "I want a single to London King's Cross," Andrew said. Leopard, following standard procedure, offered helpful advice. "A return ticket is only 50 pence more." Andrew was firm in his response. "No, just a single." The ticket cost £31.40. For an experienced railway employee, this exchange stood out. Most travelers, especially young ones conscious of money, would choose the return option for such a small additional cost. Andrew's insistence on the one-way fare suggested either absolute certainty about his plans or complete uncertainty about his return. At 9:34 a.m., Andrew boarded the train to London. The service was running 18 minutes late. A fellow passenger later recalled seeing a teenage boy traveling alone, playing on a handheld gaming device, consistent with Andrew's PSP. The journey to King's Cross took 1 hour and 46 minutes. Andrew's train arrived in London at 11:20 a.m. At 11:25 a.m., security cameras captured him walking through the main concourse of King's Cross Station, heading toward the exit that led onto the busy London streets. This 5-second piece of footage represents the last confirmed sighting of Andrew Gosden. After 11:25 a.m. on September 14, 2007, he simply vanished. Kevin and Glenys Gosden returned home from work that Friday evening, expecting to find their son in his usual spot, either gaming in the basement or doing homework in his room. Instead, they discovered Andrew's school uniform folded neatly on a chair in his bedroom. The house was empty. Their initial concern escalated to panic as they called Andrew's friends, only to learn he had never arrived at school that day. By 7 p.m., they contacted South Yorkshire Police to report their son missing. The initial police response proved catastrophic for the investigation. Rather than immediately launching a comprehensive search, officers focused their attention on the Gosden family as potential suspects. Kevin Gosden later alleged that police used unlawfully recorded interviews to pressure him into revealing what they assumed was a family secret behind Andrew's disappearance. This misplaced focus consumed precious time when every hour mattered most. Meanwhile, a devastating administrative failure was unfolding. South Yorkshire Police claimed they had requested British Transport Police to search King's Cross CCTV footage within 2 days of Andrew going missing. However, BTP officers reported they could not identify Andrew among the thousands of people passing through the station daily. It took 3 weeks before a second review of the same footage successfully identified Andrew. By then, the damage was irreversible. In London's constantly updating security network, 3 weeks meant that any cameras that might have captured Andrew's movements after 11:25 a.m. had already recorded over their data. The trail had gone completely cold. The evidence that remained painted a contradictory picture. Andrew's decision to purchase a one-way ticket suggested permanence, someone planning not to return. The £200 withdrawal represented significant financial preparation, indicating a major planned expenditure. Yet he had packed no survival items, no coat for London's evening chill, no change of clothes, no charger for his PSP. This combination of apparent long-term planning with short-term oversight baffled investigators. Digital analysis revealed another puzzle. Andrew had no email address, no social media presence, no online footprint whatsoever. In 2007, this was unusual but not impossible for a 14-year-old. It meant that grooming theories, predators luring him to London through internet contact, lacked supporting evidence. Despite these setbacks, credible sightings began emerging from London. The most compelling came from staff at a Pizza Hut restaurant on Oxford Street. A worker reported serving a teenage boy matching Andrew's description on the afternoon of September 14th. The witness described the customer as eating alone, appearing nervous, and speaking with an accent consistent with Andrew's Yorkshire background. The family found this sighting particularly believable because Pizza Hut was one of Andrew's favorite restaurants. Other reported sightings proved less reliable. A month later, someone claimed to see Andrew in Covent Garden, but the described behavior, outgoing and social, contradicted everything known about his introverted personality. Each false lead deepened the mystery while the real trail grew colder. Andrew's bedroom remained exactly as he left it that Friday morning. His rock collection sat undisturbed on the windowsill. Slipknot posters still covered the walls. His parents couldn't bring themselves to change anything, clinging to the hope that he might walk through the door at any moment. For Kevin and Glennis Gosden, time had stopped on September 14, 2007. Their lives became consumed by a single, relentless question. Where was their son? "We're trapped in an unending nightmare," Kevin wrote in a reflection for the charity Missing People years later. The words carried the weight of a father who had searched every possible avenue for answers and found none. Glennis described their daily reality with heartbreaking simplicity. "Every morning, we wake hoping today brings answers." Each sunrise brought the same cruel cycle of hope and disappointment. Phone calls that might be news about Andrew, emails that could contain a breakthrough, strangers approaching them on the street who thought they had seen their son. The psychological toll proved devastating. Kevin was eventually diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, waking each day gripped by panic and dread. Their lives, as he described it, had been stripped back to bare survival. Work, social relationships, future plans, everything became secondary to the singular focus of finding Andrew. Yet they refused to surrender. The couple launched a tireless campaign to keep their son's case in public consciousness. They worked with Missing People charity, appeared on television programs, gave newspaper interviews, and participated in podcasts. They commissioned age progression photos showing how Andrew might look as an adult, highlighting his distinctive double ridge on his right ear, a unique feature that could aid identification. Kevin became methodical in his approach, keeping detailed notes of every theory, every potential lead, every fragment of information that emerged about the case. These notes would eventually fill multiple binders, creating a comprehensive archive of a father's desperate search for his missing child. Behind their public campaign lay a family learning to live with an absence that refused to heal. December 2021. 14 years after Andrew Gosden walked out of King's Cross Station, South Yorkshire Police made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the true crime community. 2 men had been arrested in connection with Andrew's disappearance. The charges were serious: kidnapping and human trafficking. The older suspect, aged 45, faced an additional charge of possessing indecent images of children. For investigators who had spent over a decade chasing dead ends, this represented the first major breakthrough since the initial CCTV footage. The arrests raised fascinating questions about modern detective work. How do you solve a case from 2007 using 2021 technology? Andrew had vanished in an era before smartphones, before widespread social media, before the digital footprints that now define most criminal investigations. His case existed in a technological gap, too late for traditional police methods, too early for digital forensics. The answer lay in advanced data analysis and cold case techniques that hadn't existed in 2007. Police had spent years building profiles of potential suspects, cross-referencing databases, and following connections that earlier investigators couldn't have detected. The arrests suggested that someone, somewhere, had finally made a mistake that revealed their connection to Andrew's disappearance. For the Gosden family, the news represented the first genuine hope they had experienced in over a decade. Kevin and Glennis found themselves in close contact with investigating officers, describing the period as an intensified phase of their emotional journey. After years of false sightings and disappointed expectations, they dared to believe that answers might finally emerge. The grooming theory gained new credibility. The charges of possessing indecent images suggested a predator who targeted vulnerable young people. Had Andrew been lured to London through methods that left no digital trace? Had someone identified him as a potential victim and convinced him to make that fateful journey? Drop your theory in the comments. After 14 years of investigation, what evidence finally broke this case open? The family prepared themselves for the phone call they had waited 14 years to receive. Police briefings became more frequent. Legal proceedings loomed ahead. For the first time since September 2007, Kevin and Glennis Gosden allowed themselves to hope that their nightmare might finally be ending. They had no idea that their worst disappointment was yet to come. September 2023. Nearly 2 years after the arrests that had given the Gosden family their first real hope in over a decade, Kevin's phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to a South Yorkshire police detective. The conversation was brief, clinical, and utterly devastating. Both men had been officially eliminated from the investigation. After months of legal proceedings, extensive questioning, and forensic analysis, police had determined that neither suspect had any connection to Andrew's disappearance. The charges that had seemed so promising, kidnapping, human trafficking, possession of indecent images, were unrelated to the case that had consumed the Gosden family's lives. Kevin's response, shared publicly afterward, captured the crushing weight of false hope. We're no closer to answers than we were 16 years ago. The elimination of these suspects did more than return the case to square one. It destroyed what had felt like the most credible lead in the investigation's history. For nearly 2 years, the family had lived with renewed purpose, believing that justice might finally emerge from their prolonged suffering. They had endured the emotional intensity of legal proceedings, the stress of media attention, and the psychological preparation for potential revelations about their son's fate. Instead, they found themselves back in the same position they had occupied since 2007, completely in the dark about what happened to Andrew. Glennis described their emotional state as living in limbo, suspended between hope and despair, unable to grieve properly because they still didn't know if their son was alive or dead. The failed arrests revealed something troubling about the investigation itself. If these men, who had seemed like such strong suspects, had no connection to Andrew's case, how many other potential leads had been pursued down similar dead ends? The real mystery, it turned out, wasn't just what happened to Andrew Gosden. It was why, after 16 years of investigation, police seemed no closer to solving his disappearance than they had been on day one. After 16 years of investigation, 3 primary theories have emerged to explain Andrew Gosden's disappearance. Each contains compelling evidence. Each also contains fatal flaws that prevent definitive conclusions. The runaway theory. The strongest evidence supporting voluntary disappearance lies in Andrew's deliberate actions that Friday morning. The one-way ticket purchase suggests permanence, someone planning not to return. The £200 withdrawal represents significant financial preparation, indicating he expected substantial expenses. His return home to change clothes demonstrates premeditation rather than impulse. Missing persons expert Dr. Sarah Henderson, who has studied hundreds of teenage disappearance cases, notes that Andrew's behavior fits established patterns. The clothing change, the cash withdrawal, the transportation arrangements, these are hallmarks of planned departure. However, this theory crashes against Andrew's established personality. Kevin Gosden has consistently described his son as the opposite of rebellious. Andrew was a thinker, not a rebel. He was content with his routines, comfortable in his own space. The boy who needed encouragement to walk to the local shop had never expressed interest in adventure or independence. More problematically, Andrew packed no survival essentials, no coat for London's autumn weather. No charger for his PSP, no change of clothes, no toiletries. His preparation was simultaneously sophisticated and catastrophically incomplete. The foul play theory. In 2007, King's Cross maintained what locals described as a seedy reputation. The area surrounding the station was known for drug activity, sex work, and what one detective called seriously dodgy characters. For a vulnerable teenager carrying £200 in cash, this environment posed obvious dangers. Former Metropolitan Police Detective Inspector Marcus Thompson, who worked the King's Cross area during that period, explains the risks. A small 14-year-old with that much cash would have been an easy target. Robbery gone wrong, opportunistic assault. These scenarios were unfortunately common. Andrew's physical vulnerability increased his risk profile. He looked younger than his 14 years, stood barely 5 feet tall, and was traveling completely alone. The 3-week delay in identifying him on CCTV meant that any footage of potential perpetrators had been destroyed before police knew to look for it. Yet foul play theories struggle with logistics. King's Cross, despite its reputation, remained one of Britain's most surveilled locations. Disappearing a person completely, leaving no trace, requires either exceptional luck or sophisticated planning. Random criminals rarely possess either quality. The suicide theory. This remains the most difficult theory to examine, requiring consideration of Andrew's internal psychological state that may have been invisible to his family. Teenage suicide often occurs without obvious warning signs, particularly among intelligent, introverted young people who internalize their struggles. Clinical psychologist Dr. James Morton, who specializes in adolescent mental health, notes relevant factors. High-achieving teenagers who find academic work unchallenging often experience existential questioning that parents don't detect. The intellectual capacity to contemplate complex problems can sometimes lead to dark conclusions. Andrew's fascination with The Rise and Fall of Reginald Perrin, a television comedy about a man who fakes his own death to escape his life, adds an unsettling element to this theory. His choice of London, with its anonymity and River Thames, would provide opportunities for someone seeking to disappear permanently. However, Andrew showed no signs of depression or suicidal ideation. His family life was stable and loving. His hobbies brought him genuine enjoyment. Mental health professionals emphasize that suicide typically involves detectable behavioral changes that were absent in Andrew's case. Forensic psychologist Dr. Emma Clark, who has consulted on missing persons cases for over 2 decades, identifies the fundamental problem. Every theory about Andrew Gosden contains logical contradictions. The evidence supports multiple explanations simultaneously, while supporting none definitively. The runaway theory cannot explain his lack of preparation. The foul play theory cannot explain his deliberate actions that morning. The suicide theory cannot explain his stable mental health. Each explanation requires ignoring crucial evidence that contradicts it. The 3-week delay in identifying Andrew on security footage represents one of British policing's most costly administrative failures. Detective Chief Inspector Andy Fife, who later reviewed the case, describes the impact. Those 3 weeks destroyed our best chance of solving this case. In a city like London, CCTV footage is the closest thing to time travel we have. When it's gone forever. The lost footage might have shown Andrew's destination, revealed whether he met someone, or captured his final moments. Instead, investigators were left with a 5-second clip that raised more questions than it answered. After 16 years, Andrew Gosden's disappearance remains what one expert called the perfect unsolvable case, a mystery where every possible explanation contains impossible contradictions. Let's return to those final 5 seconds of footage that have haunted investigators for 16 years. 11:25 a.m., September 14, 2007. King's Cross Station main concourse. Andrew Gosden walks through the security camera's field of view carrying his black canvas satchel, PSP, visible in his hand. His movement appears purposeful, not hesitant. He's not looking around nervously or checking his phone. He didn't own one. His body language suggests someone who knows exactly where he's going. But where? The camera captures him heading toward the exit that leads onto Euston Road, one of London's busiest thoroughfares. Beyond that exit lay a sprawling metropolis of 8 million people. Thousands of streets, countless hiding places. In 2007, much of central London existed in CCTV blind spots. A person could vanish into the urban maze and never be found. Consider the stakes in this moment. Andrew was 14 years old, 5 feet tall, carrying 200 pounds in cash through an area known for predatory criminals. He had no mobile phone, no way to call for help, no backup plan. His parents believed he was in math class 50 miles away. If something went wrong, no one would know for hours. 3 possibilities converge in these final frames. Was he meeting someone? Had a predator spent weeks or months grooming him through methods that left no digital trace? Chat rooms in 2007 were less monitored than today's social platforms. Gaming communities connected strangers across vast distances. Someone could have identified Andrew as vulnerable, learned his interests, gained his trust, convinced him to make this journey. The 200 pounds withdrawal suggests he expected to pay for something significant, perhaps transportation costs for a longer journey. Was he running away? The one-way ticket supports this theory. His clothing change shows premeditation. Maybe Andrew had simply reached his breaking point with the predictable routine of school, home, homework, repeat. London represented adventure, anonymity, freedom from expectations. He was intellectually gifted but academically bored. Perhaps he had planned to start fresh in a city where no one knew him. Or was he planning to end his life? The Thames runs through central London, providing opportunities for someone seeking permanent escape. His favorite television show featured a character who faked his own death to disappear. Maybe Andrew had decided that disappearing completely was preferable to continuing a life that felt empty despite its stability. If you're still watching this case, smash that like button. You're one of us now, part of a community that refuses to let Andrew Gosden be forgotten. Watch his final steps frame by frame. Notice how he moves with confidence rather than fear. Observe his grip on the PSP, his familiar comfort with the satchel. These details matter because they represent the last evidence of Andrew's state of mind before he vanished forever. At 11:25 and 37 seconds, Andrew Gosden disappears from the camera's view. He steps outside King's Cross Station and enters London's urban labyrinth. What happens next remains one of Britain's greatest unsolved mysteries. These final frames hold a secret we may never unlock. They show us a boy walking toward his fate, but they cannot tell us what that fate was or why he chose it. Today, 17 years after Andrew Gosden walked out of King's Cross Station, his case remains officially open. South Yorkshire police continue to investigate new leads, though they admit publicly that substantial breakthroughs become less likely with each passing year. Kevin and Glenys Gosden have transformed their personal tragedy into a mission that extends far beyond their own family. They work closely with Missing People Charity, supporting other families navigating the nightmare of unexplained disappearances. Their expertise, born from devastating experience, helps guide parents through police procedures, media strategies, and the psychological challenges of living with uncertainty. Andrew's bedroom remains unchanged, a shrine to a life interrupted. His rock collection still sits on the windowsill. His gaming consoles wait for fingers that will never touch them again. The Slipknot posters watch over an empty space that his parents cannot bring themselves to alter. The family has commissioned multiple age progression images showing how Andrew might appear today at 31 years old. They continue highlighting his distinctive double ear ridge, hoping that someone somewhere might recognize an adult Andrew living under a different identity. But the central question that has driven this investigation for nearly 2 decades remains unanswered. What compelled a quiet, content homebird to abandon everything familiar and disappear into London's chaos? Was Andrew Gosden a victim of circumstances beyond his control, or was he the architect of his own vanishing? Did someone lure him to London with promises we'll never understand? Or did he orchestrate his own escape from a life that appeared perfect from the outside but felt suffocating from within? The truth died somewhere in those London streets on September 14, 2007. Without Andrew's voice to explain his choices, we're left with fragments of evidence that support every theory while proving none. Subscribe to TCI Crime Stories for our next investigation, and tell us in the comments what case you'd want us to examine next. The disappearance of Andrew Gosden teaches us something profound about the nature of love and loss. Some mysteries don't end with resolution. They end with the recognition that love never stops searching, hope never completely dies, and some questions matter more than their answers.